What's happening? Welcome back to the It's Too Easy podcast. It's Zach, Jake. Obviously, if you tuned in last week, it wasn't our best week, but we're still up in the positives, over 500, so can't complain too much. We knew the hot streak was going to come to an end one of these days, and now it's time to get hot again. Jake, what are we doing for college football this week?
Yeah, so this week, huge slate for college football. We're both super excited for it. First game that we have on the slate is USC versus Notre Dame. Obviously, Notre Dame's had a few rough, shaky weeks against Ohio State and then last week against Louisville. Two good teams that are both undefeated. And I expect that streak to kind of continue against a USC team that hasn't looked the greatest on defense, but has always found a way to win the game. And I expect them to do the same thing against Notre Dame this week.
Yeah. USC's defense is horrible. It's Lincoln Riley, and nothing's changed. But they've continued to score over 42 every single week. They find a way to get it done, and they need this because in the final 4 or 5 weeks, they still have to play Washington, Oregon, UCLA, Utah, and maybe Cal or something like that in between. So I do expect USC to go out there and get the win.
Yeah, USC money line for sure at plus 115 this week. That's something we may even think about laying in our parlay. So keep your eyes out for that.
Go
Next game on the
Trojans!
slate. Yep, fight on. Next game on the slate for us that we wanted to talk about are the Ducks walking into playing the Huskies. I know it's college game days all over this one. I love my Ducks, but for some reason, I just have a feeling that this one's not going our way. I think it's going to be a back and forth game, or it's going to be within a couple scores. But I'm not necessarily too hopeful that we're going to be able to walk away with this one in the end. I just know that environment in Washington is going to be a tough place to play for us, and if the rain starts, never know kind of what's going to happen. So I do think that Washington's going to win. I'd like it minus 2.5 at minus 110. But if the Ducks end up winning, I wouldn't be mad I lost that bet.
Yep, I'm in the same boat as you. I'm thinking Washington wins. I do think this game's going to be a tell for what's going to happen in Washington, USC, and USC, Oregon. The
Yeah,
Pac-12 always likes to do those little triangles where one team beats another, that beats another, beats another. So I'm interested to see what happens. I do think the Huskies end up pulling this one off just because they're at home. But the line being 2.5 does suggest that Oregon is slightly favored to win this game.
yeah.
So go Ducks, but if the Huskies win, that's a fun team to watch.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that Michael Penix doesn't get nearly enough credit. I mean, obviously people are starting to talk about him now, but at the beginning of the season, I don't know if he was necessarily like one of the top Heisman hopefuls, but he's definitely up there now. And I look
Mhm.
for him to have another big week against Oregon, and I look for our secondary. It's going to be all on our DBs. If Kyrie Jackson and them boys can cover the three top wide receivers in Washington, that's going to be able to
Yeah.
win us the game. All it's going to take, I think, is getting a couple 3-and-outs or something to just get the ball back into our possession to be able to make it give us a chance on offense. But with the way Washington's been playing, I don't see our defense being able to stop them from throwing the ball. So we'll see how it goes. Next game on the slate for us is Tennessee and Texas A&M. Obviously, this game, big SEC game. Texas A&M just had kind of a rough week against Alabama. Looking for them to kind of bring it back this week. They're 3-point dogs against Tennessee. Zach and I, we both like Texas A&M +3 this week. It feels like they're going to bounce back. Their quarterback and their coach are pretty good, so we'll see if that happens at home for them.
Yeah, I also like that Texas A&M was able to shut down the run game from Alabama, and I think that's a huge part of the offense for Tennessee is getting Warren and Small both going. And if that's getting shut down early, then you're going to make Joe Milton pass to, Squirrel White and a bunch of other guys. But just the offense isn't explosive enough to be able to beat, I don't think, a Texas A&M team. I am interested to see how the Tennessee defense shows up against what is it, Max Johnson, I think is the QB right now in for Texas A&M, who's looked good since taking over for their starting QB getting injured.
Next game on the slate, Miami and UNC. UNC, I think, is 3.5-point favorites, maybe 4.5 now. I'm buying it down to 2.5. I think that that's going to be a tough, gritty game, but I do think that UNC will be able to cover a field goal in the end. So yeah, give me the minus 2.5 at minus 150 for UNC in that one.
I was originally leaning Miami just because I feel like UNC's remaining schedule isn't that tough, especially with Riley Leonard going down. But after watching Mario Cristobal completely blow the game against Georgia Tech with 25 seconds left, I'm going to go with UNC to cover the 2.5 as well.
Yeah, it just feels like the telltale play after that Miami meltdown last weekend. So Mizzou and Kentucky is next. Kentucky is, I think, 3-point favorites, but I'm buying it down to 2.5 at -125. I think that Mizzou is a good team, but I just think that LSU's defense also isn't good. So I think that they were able to just kind of put it on LSU and kind of keep themselves in the game. But that game, it was more out of reach than people would think. But I do think that Kentucky is going to be able to kind of run the ball down Mizzou's throat this week and be able to cover the 2.5 points.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of controlling the pace of play, and you do that more so by running it. Whereas Mizzou does like to move the football, and the Brady Cook that we saw the last couple years is kind of who we saw with a couple turnovers in that game against LSU. Even though he threw all over them,
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm expecting to see Kentucky win that game at home. Not necessarily decisively, but I feel like they're going to win it for sure.
Yeah, it's a bounce back game. They just got kind of exposed by Georgia. I mean, so
Mhm.
they have to get back to their basics of running the football, and if they're able to get Ray Davis the ball, it's tough to bet against that team.
Mhm.
Next game that we were talking about a little bit is UCLA and Oregon State. I think Oregon State's 3.5-point favorites, but we're buying it
Mhm.
down to 2.5 again. I mean, it just makes sense right there next to a field goal. UCLA is a tough team to play, but up in at home for Oregon State, I feel like once again they're just going to be able to control the pace of play, run the ball, and they're definitely one of the better running teams in the Pac-12. And UCLA still got a freshman quarterback in Dante Moore that has looked good, but I just don't think he's going to be able to control the pace of play against Oregon State. So I'm taking them -2.5.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting game that's going to be one in the trenches. It's two teams that prefer to run the football. Obviously, Damian Martinez is one of the best running backs in the league with Oregon State. But Carson Steele and the whole committee for UCLA are very good as well. I do think going into Corvallis is going to be tough for UCLA. They just came out off a high, obviously at home, beating Washington State, got a bunch of turnovers. I don't think they're going to get as many turnovers this week, even though DJ does seem to throw a pick, it seems like, in important moments. But I do think Oregon State's able to rally at home and get the win.
West Virginia's favorites against Houston, buying that to -145, 2.5 points. So yeah, I just like West Virginia. They've been a pretty solid team this season, been pretty gritty, been able to grind out wins. So I'm looking for them to take care of Houston, who's not been very good at all.
Yeah, TCU smacked Houston. West Virginia beat TCU. I'm going to take West Virginia to beat Houston as well, covering 3 points, 4 points, whatever it might be. The offense for West Virginia is not phenomenal. They like to run the ball, so if they end up winning it, it won't necessarily be the highest of scoring games. But I do think that they win it and cover at least 3 points.
Yeah, for sure. Next game that you really like is Tulane and Memphis. I think
Hmm.
that Tulane's pretty heavy favorites now. That line's moved quite a bit. I think it might be up to 4.5, but I think you and I are liking it at 2.5 for Tulane at -180. Feels like something you might be able to throw together with maybe another team in a parlay. It might be a good something to stick together. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, going into Memphis is going to be tough because they're a good team that also likes to run the football. Tulane obviously had such a great season last year. Michael Pratt's back and they're running it well. Their defense is pretty solid. So I do expect it to be a battle. A lot of ground game activity, most likely from Memphis. And I think Michael Pratt's going to be able to expose the defense in Memphis a little bit and score a lot of points. So I got Tulane winning. I don't love 4 points, but I'll definitely buy it down to 2.5 and take that.
Right on. Next game, Ohio State is 19.5-point favorites against Purdue. Purdue's been pretty bad against most everybody. They lost by 21, I think, to Wisconsin. And Wisconsin's decent, but they're not Ohio State level. So I expect Ohio State to cover 19.5 in this one, even away.
Yep. Yeah. Ohio State started slow last week versus Maryland, which was shocking, but still ended up covering the 19-point spread versus undefeated Maryland team at the time with a much better quarterback. So playing against Purdue, who sucks, they should cover 19 again. I know they are without, is it Amika Ibuka that's out now? But that just means Marvin Harrison, Kate Stover, Fleming, they're all going to get more touches. Travion Henderson's also back at running back for the Ohio State team, so they should cover that no problem.
Yep. Look for. I'm thinking maybe if Henderson's back, look for his over too, because Purdue has not been good against the run.
Hmm.
Fresno State and Utah State next game. I was kind of looking at. I like Fresno State money line in this one at -230. I think that Fresno State's just the better team. They've had a tougher schedule, and I think that Utah State did have a pretty tough couple of games, but I think that Fresno State's just the better team. And at the money line at -230, I feel like that's pretty good money for that. So yeah, give me Fresno State.
Yep, yeah, I'm thinking the same way. So just Fresno State money line.
Right on. Next game that we both really like is Kansas against Oklahoma State. They're away, but they are favorites by 3 points. I'm thinking that they're going to cover the three. They've been a pretty solid team other than that loss to Texas. So I think that they're going to be able to kind of keep that momentum going against Oklahoma State.
Yep, that was my favorite pick from last week. Was Kansas plus money at home against UCF, and they went out, and I think they only ended up winning by 20-ish, but I think they were up by like 35 at one point as underdogs at home. I love that, and so I'm going to take them again -3. Oklahoma State just had a couple good wins, beating Kansas State last week. They looked very dominant, but I don't think that they're that good of a team. They were just well coached, and Will Howard made a bunch of costly turnovers that was unusual for him. I don't think Kansas is going to do the same, being more of a ground game team, especially with Daniels out. I know they stuck to the run and ran for 400 plus last week. And Bean's a good quarterback, so when he needs to sling it, he can do that. So Kansas -3.
Yeah, I think Kansas is going to be able to take care of them in this one. Next game is BYU against TCU. TCU has looked incredibly shaky, and now without their quarterback, it's tough to see them winning this game just in general, even at home.
Mm-hmm.
After that loss against West Virginia at home, I think that's kind of where I started to lose a lot of faith in that TCU team. The kind of shaky loss to Colorado at the beginning just felt kind of like a one-off, but
Mm-hmm.
this last loss against West Virginia and then the one last weekend just feels like they're not moving in the right way. And BYU, although they don't run the ball well, I do think that Keaton Slovis is going to be able to kind of open the field up and get his wide receivers out in space. And for that reason, I do think that BYU is going to cover the 6. I don't necessarily like money line, but with TCU's quarterback out now, I feel like the money line is definitely somewhere where you can get good money.
Yeah, yeah, we've been kind of rallying behind the Cougs all year, and I like them again. Obviously, going on the road is going to be tough, but Keaton Slovis is a good quarterback, and TCU, we don't know who's going into the quarterback position. The weapons for BYU are there. TCU really only has the run game, and they might run it for 200 plus yards, but I do like BYU to go in there, cover the 6, and I probably will sprinkle on them winning the game as well.
Right on. Next game, trying to decide if I wanted to avoid this one, is Iowa and Wisconsin. Um, there was a moment where I was like, dang, I really don't like the 10 points, but Iowa just lost their quarterback and they've been pretty abysmal with their backup. So I actually think that I'm going to buy more points for this one and buy it to -12 at +150 for Wisconsin. I feel like they're going to win this game by 3 scores. I don't think Iowa's going to have, they're going to be able to win by at least 17. I don't think Iowa's going to have much to do. Wisconsin maybe even look for a pick six or some sort of defensive score that set or defensive turnover that sets them up. So yeah, I'm looking for Wisconsin to win by 2+ scores.
Yeah, I saw the line at 10 and I was like, oh, I got to hammer Iowa, but I forgot Cade McNamara was out and their quarterback that came in last week was 6 of 17. I know their defense is good. It's a big spread for two teams that I dislike, so I'm not going to touch it, but I'll be rooting for -17 for you.
Yeah, I may not take it all the way to -17, but definitely if you guys can get the -12, we both found that on the books already at +150. I do think that Wisconsin will win by 3 scores. Even if they would win by 2 touchdowns, you'll be making some money there. So for sure, hammer
Yep.
that one. Next game on the slate, Kansas State and Texas Tech. That's even money for kind of both teams. Kansas State kind of had a tough loss last week, but we're looking for them to bounce back. The quarterback, obviously, you kind of touched over, made some uncharacteristic errors, And I just don't think he's going to be able to make those kind of errors again, especially against a Texas Tech team that's not very good. Obviously, Oregon had trouble with them, but that was just, I think, beginning of the season things, and playing against your old quarterback, he had some vengeance on his mind. So I think Kansas State's going to be able to take this one. Give me the money line for them.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if Shuck's playing because I know he was out the last 2 weeks, and so the quarterbacks that they've had in haven't looked good. So I'm
Okay.
definitely expecting, even if he does play, I think Kansas State wins it. If he doesn't play, I think Kansas State handles them fairly easily. So I think that's a good bet for plus money this week.
Yeah, Kansas State money line, even money I think right now, which is
Hmm.
solid. So, last game on the slate for college football is Marshall against Georgia State. I know you're super interested in this one. You were going back and forth, but I'll let you kind of go more into it.
Yeah, I was rooting for Georgia State a couple times to start the year. They looked really hot. They have a good team. Obviously, like to throw it, like to run it, whatever. They can move the football pretty well. Marshall can do the same. They just put up 41 on NC State at NC State. Carter Finley is a hard place to play. NC State's got a good defense, especially being at home. The crowd was into it. But they were in a shootout 41-48 with NC State. And obviously, I think NC State, even though they're not as good this year, I think they're a better team than Georgia State. So I'm going to take Marshall plus money or even. I think it's an even
Yeah,
line this week.
even
So
money.
I am gonna take them even money going into beat Georgia State.
There you go. Last pick for college football. Marshall money line, even money. Transitioning over to the NFL, obviously we ended up doing a little bit better in NFL last week than we did in college football. So let's try and keep that momentum going. First game on the slate that we're both looking at is Commanders and the Falcons. I do think it's going to be a close game, but there's going to be some sort of Sam Howell mistake made late in the game that the Falcons are going to be able to capitalize on and win by a field goal. So give me the Falcons money line at minus 145.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn on this game because I do think the Commanders are probably a better football team. I do think the Falcons are going to have to bounce back and get a win though, and they're at home, so I'm going to lean with the Falcons money line. I'm not sure if I'll take the points, but definitely leaning Falcons money line.
Yeah, there you go. Next game is the Ravens against the Titans. I believe the Ravens are 3.5 or 4 point favorites against the Titans. That's another one of those games in London. We got kind of screwed on London games. The Bills didn't come out to play, and then the Jags did come out and play really well. I've got to give it to them. Titans have just been one of those teams that's been like they win one week, lose the next week, win one week, lose the next week. But I just feel like they're not a good team. So, I mean, Lamar Jackson, if he's able to get into space, I feel like Ravens shouldn't have a problem covering 2.5 in this one. 2.5 at minus 145 feels pretty right for the Ravens.
Yeah, I'm definitely expecting the Ravens to bounce back. They had 10 dropped passes, obviously or fumble and a pick in the fourth quarter. Had the safety that they gave up. Didn't get the ball snapped in time to kick a field goal before the half. It all kind of fell apart, and they were still in the game up till the last second. Obviously, the Titans aren't as good. It does scare me knowing that ETN just ran all over the place in London. I know there was complaints about the basically concrete field, but that it allowed ETN at least to pop off. So if it comes down to a running back, the Ravens don't really have one other than Lamar Jackson. Um, but Derrick Henry and Tajay Spears haven't looked phenomenal, but they definitely have the better backfield. But yeah, I expect Ravens just to bounce back in itself. I'm going to take them minus 2.5.
Yep, there we go. Next game, Vikings and the Bears. Um, Feels like a kind of a must win for the Vikings, but no Justin Jefferson now. So it's kind of a tough game to go back and forth on because the Bears obviously did just have a nice win. But the Vikings at plus 1.5 are minus 160 right now. And that feels like a pretty safe bet because I know the Vikings are favored, but there could be, some way that, the Bears end up, pulling it off in the end and squeaking it by a point. And if that happens, I'd still like to make a little bit of money. So I do like the Vikings plus 1.5 at minus 160 there.
Yeah, I definitely was leaning on the Vikings minus 2.5, 3 when it opened, and then Jetta's got put on IR, so he's out for the next 4 weeks. The Vikings have three winnable games. This is one of them. If they don't win this, I would be interested to see if Kirk eventually gets traded because if they win this, they still have hope. I think they're going to need to win three of the next four at least to have a chance to get back into it for the season. With no Jettas, that's going to make it hard. I expect Addison, Hawkinson, Madison all to get going. and I'm going to stick with the Vikings -2. Obviously, if you want to play it safe, I do think the +1.5 is a good bet, and I also think we're leaning on the over for that game, which I
Yeah,
think was listed at 44. I think we were looking
yeah,
at.
yeah.
So both teams have pretty poor defenses. So yeah, I can see it going over 44. I think that's a
Yeah, and
safe
with
play.
and with the Bears putting up 40 last week, I mean, there's a good chance that the Vikings aren't going to be able to stop them in one of the halves, and they're going to be able to put up 21 points. So I'm looking for this to be a high scoring game. Over 44 feels good for this one.
Hmm.
Next game that we were talking about, Bengals versus the Seahawks. Um, I like the Bengals -2.5. I think that the Bengals are just the better team. They have to get these wins early in the season so they can kind of get back on track. And Jamar Chase just had like 190 yards or something like that with 2 touchdowns, 16 receptions. Dude's still
Three
always
touchdowns, right?
open. Oh yeah, 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still always open. So just get him the ball, and they're going to win these games. So Bengals -2.5 is -120. I think the Seahawks defense is solid, but I do think the Bengals just have too many weapons for them, and they'll be able to find the creases somehow, some way.
Yeah, and I think T. Higgins is going to be back this week as well, so that's going to be a help just having him out there. Bengals are going home, and they got to get to 500. I think it's a lot of encouragement for them seeing the Steelers upset the Ravens last week because they're only a game back in the division. And I was going to say, while we're on the topic of the Bengals, I know that's your pick for winning the AFC, get into the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And now is the time to buy high on the Bengals. If you're someone out there that you like the Bengals a lot, you think they're going to win, they're 12-1 to win the AFC. They're 30-1 to win the Super Bowl. And so basically what that tells me is if you like them, take them to win the Super Bowl. If they get there, you can hedge and you're already getting 15-1, which is better than the 12-1 AFC odds. They're
Absolutely.
also they are also 5-1 to win their division. It was 8.5 last week. But still, 5-1, it's the lowest for all four teams in that division. If you like it, take it. Obviously, I'm going to stick with the Ravens, which as well as +120 if you like that. But yeah, definitely like the Bengals at home against the Seahawks, getting back to 500. And I think they understand that the Ravens should come back and beat the Titans, and so they're going to still be a game back if they win.
Yep, exactly. Completely agree. Next game that we're both talking a lot about is Colts and Jags. Colts are getting
Mhm.
Jonathan Taylor back, and they are missing Anthony Richardson, but Gardner Minshew has obviously played like a starting quarterback when he comes into the game, so it's tough not to take the Colts because they just absolutely steamrolled the Titans last week. And after the Jags knocked them out of the playoffs last season, I think that that team is just going to be ready to go. So I'm taking the Colts money line against the Jags +180. What do you think of that one?
Yeah, it was a hard play because I knew last week we were leaning on the Titans, gave that out, but as soon as Anthony Richardson went down, I hammered the Colts money line because I've been saying it on repeat. Gardner Minshew is a dog. It
Yeah,
was like
that
a
dude's awesome.
58% win percentage or 57% win percentage with the Jaguars before they got good, and I mean he comes in and he wins football games, and with Jonathan Taylor back. I don't think they have the best, wide receiver weapons, but Pittman's good. Taylor's back. Zach Moss has been solid for him. Alec Pierce stepped up. Downs is looking okay. It's a division rivalry. They were close for most of the. I think it was week 1 they played each other. They were close, but ended up losing by 10. I'm at least taking the Colts +4.5 on this one, and I'm gonna definitely lay some on the money line.
Yeah, I feel like the money line's
So,
just at +180. It's just not there's a little bit of salt to be sprinkled on top of that one. So yeah, Colts money line against the Jags at +180. Next game is the Dolphins and the Panthers. I think the Dolphins are full 2 touchdown favorites, maybe like -13.5.
yep.
But I like the Dolphins. There's an alternate line at -7.5 at -215 right now. I think that there's a chance that the Panthers defense has is able to keep them in the game. But I do think that the Dolphins are able to win by 2 scores, whether it be 10 or 13 or 12, whatever it be. So I do like the alt line there, 7.5 against the Panthers.
Yep. 14's a lot, but the Panthers continue
Yeah,
to surprise me with how bad they actually are. So I might even take the 14, but yeah, definitely taking it down to 7.5. Um, yeah, Dolphins should win handily. I know A Chain is now injured as well, but It's not like they really need him with Mostert still in the backfield and being able to throw it to Tyreek. And Waddle hasn't even got going yet this season, I might add. And yet
Yeah,
their offense is still setting records through 5 weeks. So
yeah.
Dolphins should cover that, no problem.
And can't even forget the Dolphins defense. Like you watch that offense put up 700 yards, and you can't even sleep on that defense because that defense is pretty solid when they get going too. That secondary can fly around. So yep, Dolphins
Mm-hmm.
minus 7.5 all line against the Panthers. If you're brave, take them 2 scores. Next game, Saints 1.5 point favorites against the Texans. Texans had a tough week last week where they ended up losing to the Falcons. I think it was. Who was it? The
Mm-hmm.
Falcons. Yeah,
Yep, Falcons
and
21-19.
yeah, and that was just a tough break for them. CJ Stroud's obviously played pretty well. Like, definitely been my favorite for rookie quarterback of the year, at least. Maybe not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily rookie of the year, but he's been solid. The Texans have obviously turned around from what looked like a completely disastrous franchise to having hope, which is a step. So, good for them.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think the Saints are going to be able to cover 1.5. They just smacked the Patriots after the Cowboys did, and Saints are playing pretty well. Their defense is solid, so I think just 1.5 is not nearly enough against the Texans.
Yeah. I think the biggest question mark I had for the Saints this year was, are they going to be able to score the ball? Because through 3 weeks, they hadn't put up 20 in a single game.
Yeah,
And then against a very good Patriots team, they won 34-0. Granted, they had a pick six.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, Mac Jones is just terrible. But the line's horrible. The weapons are not creating space, so it's not necessarily all on him. But they were able to win handily 34-0 as underdogs. We talked about that last week. Why were they
yeah,
underdogs?
yeah,
1.5 point dogs, and they didn't even give up a point. So there's that. I'm going to stick with the Saints against the Texans. I really don't think the Texans are that good, but they definitely look like they have hope for the future. So that's a good step, I think. And they don't need to be winning games. I think they need to keep losing a few, try and get a few higher draft picks, and then maybe be solid next year.
yeah. I think just the thing right now is just Vegas has a little bit too much hope in them. Minus one
Mm-hmm.
and a half just is not nearly enough for a Saints team that dominated the Patriots last week. So we'll see. Speaking of the Patriots, the next game is Patriots and the Raiders. Raiders just had a bounce back week where they were able to get the victory at the end of the game off of a crazy interception or turnover. I can't remember exactly what it was.
Pick in the end
Um,
zone, yeah.
yeah. But I'm taking them 2.5 points against the Patriots. Patriots obviously have looked terrible the last 2 weeks, getting outscored probably like something like 80-6 or something like that. So yeah, Raiders minus 2.5. Devontae and Josh Jacobs, if you can get them happy again, then they'll be 3-3, have a chance to get themselves back into that division. Tough division, but Raiders minus 2.5. Let's see that sphere light up again.
Yeah, this one kind of scares me because of Belichick, but with how the Patriots have looked, I'm still going to hammer the Raiders minus 2.5. I think that's great value. I think that's a good one to possibly throw into parlays. Um, yeah, I mean the Patriots just can't develop anybody.
Yeah,
I
for
think I
some.
saw a stat that in the last 10 years they've had two guys that they drafted that made Pro Bowls, and it was a punter and a punt returner. And so what they're doing over there, I'm not sure. Belichick probably needs to go. But yeah, Raiders have a chance to bounce back, and on top of if they win this, they're 3-3. They're 3-3 going to Chicago, which I
Yeah,
think is a good direction to be heading. Devontae didn't even really get the ball this week. Why? Couldn't tell you. He had 4 targets. He caught 4 passes.
he was
So
wide
I think
open
that,
the majority of the game.
yeah, against his former team, it's like give him the ball. I know he was questionable going into it, but I expect him to have a big week against the Pats.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Raiders minus 2.5. And you kind of mentioned it a little bit. I think this potentially could be the last year that we see Belichick. This could be his walking away party this year. And, with what he's got over there, the only thing they got going is a Christian Gonzalez who just got injured for the rest of the season. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, why not just call it? So,
Yeah,
yeah,
Judon's out too. So it's like Judon got hurt. Yeah,
yeah.
you said
There's not a
Gonzalez
lot
got
going
hurt.
for them right now.
Yeah,
So,
nothing.
next game, Eagles and the Jets. Obviously, Jets defense solid. Got them. I mean, they actually had a pretty solid game, but that pick to end the game last week was absolutely electric. I loved that. The pick six
Fumble
at
for
the end,
six.
or was a fumble for six.
Fumble for six. Yeah,
Yeah, something
yeah, it was
like
a
that. But
fumble. Russell
whatever it
Wilson
was, that
tossed
dude,
it.
That dude running it back was absolutely electric. I just remember watching that going, oh my gosh, there we go. But because
Yeah.
we had the Jets money line at plus money, and that was sick. But
Hmm.
this week, obviously, facing a much tougher Eagles team. So I'm liking the Eagles money line. I think that plus 6 might be a little bit too much against this Jets team. So I do like the money line at minus 300. Minus 300, not a very favorable number if you're trying to get some money. But this Eagles team has been pretty solid. The Eagles and the Niners are the clear cut favorites to win the NFC. So why not just take them against this Jets team that's kind of been struggling?
Yeah, I think it was a 7 point line, but yeah, I don't really love the seven. We talked about how they could possibly get a defensive touchdown, and then
Yeah.
otherwise, offensively matching up, they're going to outscore. So maybe that's fair to have seven. I don't love it, so I would stick with the Eagles money line minus 300. I don't know if that's worth me betting on it. I don't love the value in it. So
Yeah.
if anything, I'll probably lean away from the game, but I do expect Hurts to go win a game like he's continued to do over and over and over again.
Yeah, if you get the thrill of parlays, that might be something to just toss into a parlay to see if you can't up the ante a little bit.
Hmm.
Another next game, Lions and Bucks. That's going to be quite a banger. Obviously the Bucks have looked pretty solid, but the Lions are leading the division by far, and I think that this is the game where they kind of just extend that lead. I don't think the Bucks have a very tough game next week, so I think they'll be able to bounce back the week after. But I think that the Lions are going to be able to kind of cement their place in their division. And I look for the Lions. They're just a wagon. Their defense is flying around the ball, and their offense continues to make plays. So yeah, Lions money line minus 175 against the Bucks.
Yeah, we were talking about the Panthers defense being fairly solid, and they've kind of yet to look that because they gave up 42, I believe, to the Lions last week. That was without Jameer Gibbs and without Amon-Ra St. Brown. The Lions have
True.
looked good. We're going to stick with the money line. I will say Todd Bowles has got the Bucks playing good football. They've got great defense right now. The defense looks back to where it was when they won the Super Bowl. So I wouldn't be shocked to see them win, but I do think the Lions are going to win this one, and the Bucks will probably bounce back the following week with I think it's the Falcons.
Yeah, I think it was the Falcons. But yeah, Lions money line. They've been a wagon. That team culture is absolutely flipped around. Gotta love MCD. See that dude's an absolute god coach. Like he's been a godsend for that entire city, pretty much. I mean, I can't think of the last time that Detroit's had a winning team. Like Tigers, Red Wings, like all these teams are just trash. I mean, Pistons,
Yeah,
like. There's not a single good team that I can think of in that city that's been good in the past 20 years. So good for the Lions to kind of revive that city. The
yeah,
last game on our list is the Cowboys and the Chargers. Chargers are 1.5 point dogs against the Cowboys. Cowboys just got smashed by the Niners. Obviously, we want them to win because we're Cowboys fans, but there's not a lot of hope after last week. If the Chargers are able to do any sort of assimilation to what the Niners were able to do on defense, then I think that they should be able to beat the Cowboys. So I do like the Chargers plus 1.5 at minus 110 in this one.
yeah. I feel like this is a very interesting game because the Cowboys should bounce back. However, the Chargers are getting Eckler back, which they haven't really had. They're also coming off a bye week, and they're at home. And I feel like every time I watch the Chargers Cowboys, it's a 3 point game, whether it's 20 to 17, 23-20, whatever it's going to be. Uh, yeah, I mean, I don't know why the Chargers are underdogs at home coming off a bye against a Cowboys team that just got humiliated. Somehow they are. I'll probably take Chargers with the plus 1.5. Could always buy it to 3.5 on either side if you have a preference. But seeing the plus money, it just makes me want to take it rather than buying it for the Cowboys. So I'm going to take the
Yeah,
Chargers plus points.
plus money against this Cowboys team that's now having to play back to back away games against arguably two of the top 10 teams. I would say two both top 10 teams in the NFL. I think that is just going to be another struggling week for the Cowboys. They've proven that they've struggled against some of the better teams in the past, and unless their offensive line and the running back situation, they can figure it out when the field gets shortened in the red zone. I don't know if, field goals are going to be able to do it against Justin Herbert and this Chargers team that, finds a way into the end zone more often than not.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I did see a stat. I know Cowboys were already 26th in rush defense going into the game, but since Trayvon Diggs went down, they're 30th in passing defense. And so if you
That's
can't have a good
brutal.
rush, if you can't have a good rush defense or pass defense, and you can't run the ball, and you can't score in the red zone, which they're 30th in red zone percentage, uh, I don't know what you're really doing. It looks like garbage, but somehow they're still 3-2.
Yeah.
And I could see the Cowboys win this game, but I definitely am going to take the Chargers off a bye, get Eckler back. They're going to be rejuvenated at home, and they're going to try and go out there and get this win because I think they're also going to get back to 500.
Yeah, I think if you like the Cowboys to win this game, then you should be looking for a defensive touchdown on the Cowboys side, either defense or special teams. Someone's either going to run back a big one, Turpin, or is he hurt
Mm-hmm.
now?
I know he got hurt. I think he's still playing.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, I think that if the Cowboys do win the game, it's going to be a defensive or special teams touchdown. So if you like that, then lay that. But for the most part, Chargers plus 1.5 feels right at -110, especially at home. Coming off a bye, Cowboys just played a tough week. Can't say enough about it. Chargers team looks solid. Look for them to bounce back again, kind of even
I
up their
was
record.
also Yeah, I was also going to mention the Cowboys. I've already talked about this multiple times. I'm heated because I'm a Cowboy fan. We don't have linebacker depth. We need linebacker depth. We drafted one towards ACL. We still only had three on the team. One was a safety that became a linebacker just for the
Yeah.
Cowboys. And then out of the two linebackers we really had, Van Der Esch was clearly the better one. He's out. Neck injury, might miss most of the season. So we have two linebackers. One's a safety transferring down, which means Mike is probably going to get put in at linebacker, might lose more of the pressure off the line of scrimmage as well. So we're just going to stick with the Chargers.
Yeah, and if they put Micah at linebacker, it's going to be interesting to see how teams run the ball against him because I don't think that teams will necessarily run it as well, but they're going to have all day to throw the ball, so it's going to be tough for the Dallas secondary. So,
Yeah.
kind of transitioning out of the NFL, UFC, we had a good weekend last week. Didn't quite get the 3-0 I wanted, but 2-1 was solid. This week, have a really good slate for UFC. We have a couple picks I know that we were both really on that just made sense. The first one was Cameron Simon to win, plus 125. He has a tough matchup, but he's been kind of a wagon in the UFC. Hasn't had much of a challenge. I do think that he'll be challenged, and this will might go over 1.5 rounds. But I think that Simon will eventually get the win in either this late in the second, the third, or by decision. So Simon to win is plus money at plus 125 this weekend. Second pick I really like is Ducote to win. She's a heavy favorite at -350, but I feel like that's free money. And if you wanted to throw a no parlay, that'd be reasonable as well. I think that the person she's fighting is Ashley Yoder, and she's not very well known, but I just expect Ducote to come out and beat her handily. I don't really know what else to say other than she's just way better. The last fight on the card is Adrian Yanez versus John Martinez. That is going to be an absolute banger of a fight. It's basically boxing versus kickboxing. I think that fight is going to go over one. I'm at least hoping, but I will definitely bet that it's going over 1.5 rounds, just because that's going to be a super exciting fight. Over 1.5 rounds is -185 right now. Obviously, Adrian Yanez has been one of those people that he's always starched kind of some of the not so good fighters in the UFC, but as soon as he's gotten a higher level competition, he's had a tougher time. John Martinez definitely is some of the higher competition, so I think that this one is going to be a tougher fight for Yanez. Right now, the money's going both ways. Both fighters, I'm pretty sure, are even money, so you can pretty much pick them on that. But I like the over 1.5 rounds on that fight.
Nice. I was also going to say, after UFC, obviously, we got WNBA that I talked about a little bit a while ago. Still got the Aces over the Liberty. They came out, dominated, obviously, through three quarters. It was an even game. Aces ended up winning by 17, I believe. I expect them to continue that at home. They only lost one game at home all year. So the game tomorrow night, they should go out and win. Then they go into New York on Sunday, I believe it is, that they play game three. And if they're already up 2-0, I wouldn't be surprised to see them sweep. Otherwise, I think they'll win the next one in New York the following Wednesday to finish it off 3-0 or 3-1. Asia Wilson still put up 17, even though she had three teammates over 20 in game one. I expect her to bounce back and be kind of the star of the show for game two and to solidify herself as the WNBA Finals MVP. And then I know that you had given out a little bit for F1 last week, which was straight fire.
Yeah.
You had the order and everything. So, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so obviously Max Verstappen just was able to secure his third world championship in a row. That Red Bull car was absolutely crazy this year, the way he was able to pilot it. Obviously, Sergio Perez wasn't able to pilot it quite as well, but still ended up, I think, second in points in the world championship for now. That one's still up for grabs, but Max Verstappen is an absolute wagon. That kid just is born to drive, and I think that that wagon is going to keep rolling for the next couple of years. And for these last few races, I'm not expecting anything less than him winning. He still wants to win every single one of these races, even though he's already won the championship. So it just kind of goes to show the desire that this kid has to race and win. So yeah. Other than that, the McLarens, Oscar Piastri had a crazy sprint race where he ended up just edging out Max Verstappen in the end, which was sweet. He's the youngest driver out there driving a McLaren, and Norris ended up coming third in the actual race, and then Piastri ended up coming second in the actual race. So McLaren's ended up delivering for us. We love that. But yeah, no F1 this weekend, but then I think believe the following weekend they're back here in the US. So I'll definitely be tuning in for that, and we'll talk a little bit more about our picks for that next week.
Yeah, I was also going to say, if you didn't notice, last week we gave out a little parlay in the comment section, so give that a little look over. I think that's something that we're going to try and do every week. Put together a couple teams that we like, get good odds for it. Last week we had a little 10-1 teaser on Alabama, LSU, Colorado, and Raiders. All of them won, but Colorado unfortunately lost us the parlay. We had them -4. They blew their 7-point lead with under 3 minutes, kicked a field goal, won by 3. So we were a point away from that little 10-1. We're going to try and find good ones that we like to give out that we think have good shots at winning. Maybe even a 25-1, 50-1, something like that. We'll try and find something fun, something that has a good chance to win. And we're going to be taking those parlays as well. And then, as you can see, I got Kobe up behind me. RIP to the legend. NBA season is back. We got preseason going on right now as we speak. And we're going to be I'll be giving out my picks probably in the following week or two, kind of dissect what I expect to see from the whole season. We'll talk about some of the trades that happened in the offseason. Obviously, Dame to the Bucks, Drew to the Celtics, Porzingis to the Celtics. Like, it's chaotic. Everyone went everywhere. Beal went to the Suns. So we got a lot to talk about there. So we'll dive into that in the next week or two. But in the meantime, like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends. And like always, thanks for listening, and we will catch you guys next time.
Thanks, guys. Peace.
Peace.